Hey, guess what pulled me out of the ether? Well, look at the screenshot from the PlayStation blog, labeled on my desktop as garbage.jpg. Read that headline very careful. Physical disc production ending in January 2028 for new games released on PlayStation consoles. And it was dated July 1st, 2026. A literal bombshell dropped right into the middle of the gaming community, and it feels like the definitive end in the era. And right while I was having a reprieve from the European heat waves at that. Reading this corporate press release makes me think back to the absolute awe of the launch of the PlayStation 3. When I first got my hands on a PS3, a few years after it came out, because god, I wasn't paying $700. To me, it was more than just a gaming console. It was a Trojan horse for high definition media because it played Blu-rays. Sony fought a literal format war against HD DVD and won because they choose to put a physical disk drive into millions of living rooms, supporting a super high-tech form of disc media. Granted, the 360 ended up selling more units because it was cheaper, and also later on when Netflix came to consoles, it was the first one where you could just download it instead of needing a disc. But hey, back then physical media was the premium gold standard. Sony championed it, marketed it, and rode it straight to dominance. And now 20 years later, they're killing it. And I don't mean it in the slangy, how do you do fellow kids? Yeah, they're killing it. No, I mean literally they're taking it out back and old yellering it. They want us to transition to a completely digital ecosystem where everything we play is locked behind an ephemeral login screen. One that, if you die, according to some court cases, you can't even pass on to your relatives. Thanks, team. The shift from a massive physical archive to a digital playground has been gradual, but today the mask is completely off. And I'm kind of pissed. Chapter 1. The Death of the American Dream. Wait a second. No. Chapter 1. The Birth of Disc-Based Gaming. To understand how catastrophic this announcement is, another one from garbage.jpg, we have to look back at how we actually got here. The birth of disc-based gaming wasn't just a technical upgrade, it was something more. You have to understand what it was like when the original PlayStation launched. Cartridges had been the go-to since the late 1970s, as had 2D gaming. But the PS1 mostly focused on 3D, though let's be honest, its 2D titles hold up way better nowadays. And, well, CDs, which held vastly more on board than your average game cartridge. Just ignore that they had some pretty annoying load times. Yeah, it's fine, the Red Book audio made up for it. In the mid-90s, the entire gaming industry showed at a crossroads. Sony entered the ring with the PS1, absolutely betting the bank on the CD-ROM. Meanwhile, Nintendo stubbornly clung on the cartridges for the Nintendo 64, and off in the corner was Sega with the Saturn, which, yeah, also took CDs, but who the hell bought a Sega Saturn? The result? Nintendo was practically laughed out of the room by developers and consumers alike because cartridges were expensive to manufacture. They were severely limited in storage, and they forced developers to compromise artistic visions. And Sony wasn't even the first. The very first way to play CD-based games was the PC Engine CD, released for the Japanese version of the TurboGrafx 16 all the way back in the 80s. But Sony had a massive budget behind them, not to mention the 3D focus. Suddenly, developers weren't fighting for kilobytes, they had the headroom for sprawling orchestral soundtracks and expansive detailed worlds like Final Fantasy VII, a game that literally couldn't exist on an N64 cartridge. Trust me, early in development, they considered it. Yes, discs have their problem, disc is a problem, but transitioning to collecting CD-based games wasn't too different from collecting CD-based music CDs. A disc like a cartridge was something tangible. You could lend it to a friend, buy it secondhand from a local shop, trade it when you were done, or shelve it for a decade, confident that pumping into the tray would mean playing the game. And this had the added bonus of just being cheaper than cartridges. I mean, goodness, people seem to forget that, yeah, games are $80 now, but games that required special chips in the Super Nintendo could easily top even that. And it's so funny because Sony really was a champion of the CD format as it was, even before the PlayStation with, for example, the Discman. Sony built an empire by weaponizing the freedom of physical discs and used it to rally against Nintendo's closed, restrictive, cartridge-based way of thinking and made it seem antiquated by comparison. And Sony continued to popularize different kinds of discs. The PlayStation 2 had a DVD drive back in the year 2000, when that was something to really brag about. I mean, a lot of people bought and used it as a DVD player that could play games. The PS3 could play Blu-rays, leading to Microsoft half-assedly countering by releasing the HD DVD drive for the Xbox 360. This helped cement Blu-rays as a dominant way to watch movies during that gen, until Netflix dropped as a download on the 360 and streaming took over. And you could also use it on the Wii and PS3, but you need a disc for that, ironically. I've always felt somewhat weary of streaming. Like, I love the convenience. I have a subscription to a couple services. Look, I'll be the first to admit I enjoy me some American Dad. I even used to say hipster shit back in the day. They're like, oh yeah, I'm a proponent of physical media. I don't know. Those are early vids from like 2017. I was in uni and I'm a very passionate dumbass. And maybe I'm getting older, but this announcement kind of cemented something in me. No matter which of these formats you use, whether you're using big cartridges on the NES, tiny Switch cartridges, or a Blu-ray, it's a concrete culture of ownership. A disc meant a game was tangible. You could lend it to a friend, buy it secondhand, trade it when you were done. We traded manufacturing costs of cartridges for the sheer volume of optical media, and in return we got a sense of permanence that lasted for 30 years. Until now. Chapter 2, The Two Towers. The first cracks. But corporate infrastructure always finds a way to squeeze out consumer autonomy, and the first cracks in this physical foundation started appearing years ago with the rise of digital storefronts and downloadable content. Yeah, am I arguing that Xbox Live and WiiWare were Trojan horses? You bet your ass I am. Suddenly a game wasn't a finished piece of art on a disc anymore, it was living software servers that required a day one patch, digital expansions, and a constant internet connection just to function. I mean, God, when was the last time you bought a disc-based game that didn't require some sort of download or update just to make it boot? We watched the warning signs flash in front of us when publishers began using the physical aesthetic to kind of trick collectors into buying it. One example that really sticks out to me was when Pokemon Gold and Silver were re-released on 3DS, and they went through the trouble of manufacturing gorgeous nostalgic cardboard special edition boxes, only in certain regions granted. But it's okay, because why import them? Because even if you opened them up, all you would find was a literal slip of paper with a download code. That baffled me, and I remember a lot of people laughing at it. What was also very egregious was when I fell for something similar myself when Sonic Mania first came out. The Sonic Mania Special Edition launched on the PlayStation 4, Switch, and everything under the sun. And at launch it came with this massive, beautiful box that had a retro statue of Sonic standing on a Sega Genesis console. It even screamed Sega at you. It was gorgeous. Oh, and what about the actual literal gold ring it came with? It's so cool. But the actual game was a code printed on a card. You could hold the plastic statue and the ring in your hands, but the art itself was a digital ghost. Honestly though, in retrospect, especially seeing how much AI crap Sega's doing now, I'm not surprised. We've been traveling down this path for a long time now, and I know it's stupid to expect game companies to do the right thing because they're corporations, But now that we've arrived here, the landscape is kind of terrifying. This forced, fully digital migration is happening alongside a massive industry-wide push to turn everything into a subscription model. At the same time, tech companies are pouring billions into AI, driving actual hardware costs through the roof and making hardware and software more expensive than ever before. I was just reading the other day that 1 gig of RAM now costs the same that it did 16 years ago. Remember when game consoles got cheaper as the generation went on? Gaming is quickly becoming a luxury that is less and less affordable to the masses. Killing the physical disc completely locks down the ecosystem, obliterating the used game market overnight. You can no longer buy a secondhand copy for $20 from a local game shop. You can no longer sell your old games to afford new ones. The moment the disk drive dies, the publisher gains total monopoly over pricing. And that should sound massive alarm bells for every single one of us. In fact, it's kind of funny thinking in retrospect when Xbox Live first dropped, where the idea was, well, if you buy your game digitally, at least it'll be a little cheaper than physically. I don't think that has ever been the case.
This is your new Xbox 360.
We watched further warning signs flash when concepts like Nintendo's game key cards tried to bridge physical storefronts with purely digital redemption, selling you a plastic case with nothing but a little card that was nothing more than like digital code. You weren't buying a game, you were buying a receipt. And what happens when they decide that they don't want you to own that game anymore? I'm thinking about the seismic other recent announcement of Grand Theft Auto 6 and how that would be a digital-only release. I find it interesting that Sony waited to announce this news until they announced that GTA 6 would be digital-only. When what has the chance to be the biggest cultural phenomenon in entertainment decide that plastic cases and actually printing a disc isn't worth the manufacturing costs? That felt like the writing on the wall. And I didn't say anything then because I was afraid people would say I was paranoid, but I guess I was right. So publishers have realized that they can successfully bypass the physical retail market entirely, eliminate the used game economy. The collective consumer base will just roll over and accept it. We let them condition us to accept it, slowly and surely, and now we're having to debate a digital library that lives entirely in the cloud. And sure, it's not all awful. I mean, goodness, Steam's been around for decades, but I don't know. I think about movements like stop killing games, you know? Do you really own your games or just the license to play them while they want you to? So is that the future? A fully digital library, no more discs unless you're looking past to buy something cheaper and older and... Oh, never mind. Holy crap, retro game prices are going to bankrupt me. Hey, did you know I funded an entire international move a few years back by selling my GameCube collection?
That's nasty.
Chapter 3. What the fuck? Yeah, that's why I called it in my script, just what the fuck. This brings us right back to July 1st corporate announcement and garbage.jpg. Let's call this what it actually is. A total death knell for future preservation, history, consumer pricing, and just being generally consumer friendly. The second you lose the choice to buy a piece of plastic, you lose the choice to actually own the piece of art. You're permanently trapped renting a temporary license from a digital storefront that can be altered, censored, price gouged, or entirely revoked at the whim of an executive board. The tragic irony here is that we as consumers have already fought this war once and we won, sort of. Think back to 2013 when Microsoft announced the Xbox
Copy
One.
that.
Yeah, I watched Donkey. Hi, I'm Bill Gates. I'm gay. Yeah, I get it. They tried to implement an Orwellian digital rights system that would lock used games to a single account, essentially killing the secondhand market and game sharing. I love being able to own a game, but not let my friends play it for the weekend. And yeah, let's be honest, anyone who's around there pretty much flipped their shit. We've ripped Microsoft an absolute new one. The backlash was so catastrophic that Sony famously mocked them on stage at E3. If I remember right, wasn't there a thing with the PS4 with just a guy handing a disc to another guy? Microsoft was shamed into walking it back. And this was only a decade and some ago. Oh god, that was a decade and some ago. I'm old. But corporations play the long game, and no corporation is your friend. They realized they couldn't force us into a digital cage by locking our discs, so they baited us in with convenience instead. Enter Xbox Game Pass. At first, everyone loved it. It was the Netflix of gaming, a seemingly incredible value that gave you hundreds of titles for a cheap monthly fee. But look what happened once they got us hooked. Prices crept up, tiers were restructured, and suddenly we were being priced out of the very ecosystems we helped build. Or even more insidious, look at the prevalence of DLC. Now, even with titles like Pokemon, we see huge, expensive DLC passes announced before a game's even out. But do you ever think about the first big paid DLC scandal? Horse Armor back in Oblivion? And how we were told, no, it's okay. It'll never get much worse than cosmetics. But now Sony is taking the final, ultimate step. They aren't adding a subscription tier, but rather they're removing the physical safety net entirely. And even if you are a mostly digital gamer, even if you mostly play games digitally though, having that choice is so important. If games turn completely digital, it begins a massive structural question for the future of the industry. So now when a PlayStation 6 inevitably comes along, what conceivable reason is there to buy one? I feel the same way about the Xbox Series S. Console gaming used to be defined by its affordability and its plug-and-play simplicity, but as rising manufacturing costs, corporate greeds, and the overhead of AI-driven tech push hardware through the roof, next-gen consoles going to cost a fortune. And not only will it be expensive, but let's be real, it's not something my mom would be able to figure out to set up in time for Christmas morning, like was done years back with the PS4. If a PS6 is going to be priced comparatively with a decent mid-range gaming PC, I mean, just look at the price of the PS5 Pro. Why would you ever willingly lock yourself into Sony's closed digital prison? On PC, you have multiple competing storefronts, massive sales, mods, backward compatibility that stands decades, or if you really want to, you can buy a USB CD or Blu-ray drive. On a digital-only PlayStation, you have exactly one store, managed by one corporation, with zero competition. And if you think it's a hyperbole or that a company would never abuse that kind of absolute monopoly over playing companies, just look at Sony's own track record. Remember when they announced the subsequent closures and attempted shutdowns of PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita online stores? Of course they did! Well, actually, they wanted to before this most recent time, which was announced at roughly the same time as the cessation of disc-based games. A few years back, they were already ready to wipe out the entire digital libraries and decades of independent gaming history with the flip of a single switch, only backing out when public backlash grew too loud. And it gets worse. Recent licensing agreement problems lately have actually caused Sony to abruptly wipe out people's owned downloaded PlayStation movie libraries. They have literally already this year deleted films right out of user libraries. Films that people had paid cold hard cash to quote unquote buy, but aren't even getting a refund for. Imagine you wake up one morning and the media you've paid for has gone, replaced by a corporate error message. So they've already proven with absolute certainty that if given the chance and if problems arise, they will erase your digital library the second a legal contract ends or a server becomes too expensive to maintain. Because again, if you do not actually own it in your hands, you do not own it at all. So in conclusion, class, getting back into the flow of it, I guess this will all be an exam or something. But, you know, why even own a new PlayStation anymore? And I guess there will probably be some disc reserves, right? Like, is Limited Run Games still around? I thought they were doing some shady stuff for a bit, but... And obviously, you know, there's always the PS4. Mine's still kicking, actually. I got a new one here in Germany. I've been loving it. But why buy a discless PS5 or a 6? You know, why buy it anymore? When a console manufacturer completely severs its ties to physical media, it ceases to be an open entertainment hub and becomes a closed-loop subscription machine. It goes from being something that's really fun and potentially affordable to a walled garden where you have absolutely zero consumer rights, zero leverage, zero control, and let's be real, as time goes on, it's just going to get more and more expensive. And is it even going to stop at just being forced to download? Like, you know, we laughed at Google Stadia years back, but when is game streaming going to become the default? Now, if I'm going to be honest, I kind of saw this coming and I checked out this ecosystem long before it reached this point. Before I packed up and moved across the Atlantic, Germany, I actually gave my PS5 away to my niece and nephew, actually with a stack of games too. I left it behind, walked away, have a PS4 now. Again, looking at the catastrophic news today, I don't regret that choice for a single second, especially as I found the library so far lacking. Switch 2 is a different case, and if you would want to throw some money to my Ko-fi, yeah, I'd like to play Pokopia. I'd rather invest in platforms that seem to somewhat respect my autonomy than hand over my wallet to a company that views actual ownership as a loophole they need to patch out. To quote a great man from my Discord server named Jack Stotok, long live discs. And he's right, I mean, hey, discs will eventually rot, but at least you own that. At least if it rots, you still have in your hand and the exclusive GTA map. God, I'm rambling. I don't know how to end this off. I was hoping to appear on camera, but I've actually recently had a big back injury that said nope to that. That's probably explaining why I am a little rambly, because I am on painkillers right now. And there's so much more I could talk about here. Live service games, the Stop Killing Games movement. The fact that this pissed me off again to make a proper video here for the first time in a while. But instead, I need a nap. So let me instead leave you something a bit more lighthearted. And reminding me of a bit of, let's be real, better time. This is a Japanese commercial for the original PlayStation 1. Sony, more like sucky.
Boo! You stink!